Well, welcome. I'm so glad you came this morning. You braved the cold, so did I. And yeah, warm welcome from me. A short verse, but I think there's some impact to it. If God speaks to you as He spoke to me while preparing this, you're in for something this morning. Isn't it amazing that God is here? Like He's here with us this morning. And He's going to speak to us. He has been speaking to us already, and He's going to speak to us this morning. I think it's amazing. Like it blows my mind. We are in a series called Faith and Work. We heard from Ryan first. He told us that God works and that He has called us to work too. Work is good, and we should work well and also rest well. Work is for God and His world and His people, for the betterment of people in the world. Eric reminded us last week that work can be meaningless or pointless. If we do it well, though, it can give us peace, it can give us satisfaction if it's put in its right place and if we do it well in our lives. So we're going to carry that on this morning. We're going to be speaking about how work can become an idol in our lives. We're going to narrow our focus a bit and dig down and find out about what that means to you, what that means to me. I just want to read this reading again this morning, because what has the Tower of Babel got to do with work and the idolatry of work? Well, let's read it together. It'll be on the screen. I'll read it for us. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Now, our series, Faith and Work, is based on a book by Tim Keller, and Keller commentates on this verse, and I actually want us to read it together, just a bit of his commentary on this verse, because it's quite telling. It starts to introduce this idea on how work becomes an idol. So, if you can put it up there, Vince. So in Genesis 1 and 2, work is a joyful cultivation of creation for its own sake and God's sake. By Genesis 4, technology has become a means to power. In Genesis 11, we come to the famous story of the building of the Tower of Babel. Two reasons are given for the building of the tower. In verse 3, the people of Shinar say, "Let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly instead of stone." Someone had discovered a way of making bricks that was an advance beyond previous methods of building. It meant they could build a much taller building than had ever been built before. They wanted to take their new talents and discoveries to use them in a big city. Ever since then, the people with the most creative new ideas continue to seek out cities to find a fertile environment for experimentation and implementation of their dreams. So far, so good. But there is a second, deeper reason for their project of city building, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. What were the builders of the tower doing their work for? What what are most of today's ambitious workers doing their work for? Well, verse 4 tells us vividly. And the motivation has not changed from that day to this one. It was to maximize their power, glory, and autonomy away from God, right? So, what is an idol? We picture maybe a carved wooden thing on the mantelpiece or a big golden calf. But what is an idol to us? Again, Keller helps us. I've just pulled out some various definitions that he's given from different talks and books and so on to help us understand what an idol is to us. So he says this: an idol is anything more fundamental than God to your happiness, meaning in life, or identity. It's an inordinate desire for anything, even or especially good things. What thing, if it was suddenly absent in your life, might take away your desire to live? That is your idol. Lastly, he says, in psychological terms, an idol is where you get your identity from. In theological terms, it's the thing we turn to for our righteousness. That, friends, is an idol to us. And we're going to unpack this a little bit and how work can become an idol for us. And when we say work, we use the term fairly loosely. Any work that we do, it can become an idol. But what does that look like? What does that look like practically? Well, I've got two stories to tell you. One's made up by me, and the other one is a true story, which is really cool. So here's the made-up story. So there is a man. For argument's sake, let's call him Reagan. So Reagan goes to this prestigious private school. True story. And he likes to drop that into the conversation every now and then. And he goes through school, and then he goes to university, gets a BCom degree, gets his honors, gets his masters, and then he goes into the working world. And he gets a pretty good job to start off with. And his chest goes out a little bit. He walks with confidence. He lives with confidence because he feels, man, you know what? As young as I am, I've pretty much made it. He doesn't have a girlfriend or a wife. You see, it's not this Reagan. And but it doesn't matter because he knows he can pretty easily get one pretty soon. Look at his job. Look at his, he's earning pretty well. Reagan's a churchgoer. He's a believer. And something happens in his work where he's called to compromise on his principles. He recalls his dad, who's the CEO of quite a big company. His dad used to say, you need to make it in life. You need to climb that corporate ladder, get to the top. Because you don't want to struggle. You don't want to never have any money and just struggle with your life. What meaning will your life have? You've got to get to the top. And he remembered that. And in order to climb the corporate ladder in his firm, he had to make this compromise. So he did. He did it. It was illegal. It was against his principles, but he did it. A little bit later, his firm got audited by an independent auditor, and they found the issue. And they found out who did it. And they all got fired, including Reagan. His life changed completely. He couldn't get another job in that line anymore. Who would trust him? Everybody knew about what he did. There's no way he was going to start from the bottom again in some other job. There was no way he was going to bring himself down to a menial job. So he couldn't find work. He couldn't get anything. He lost all purpose, all meaning in life. He knew he wouldn't get how am I going to get a wife now? Who's going to want to be with me? Who's going to want to give me a job? What is the point? What is the point? He lost all meaning, all purpose. And eventually, he thought, I'm going to end it all. What hope do I have? So that's the story. Let me tell you a true story. To protect the person's identity, let's call this person Ryan. Ryan is a chartered accountant. He's one of 3 sons and the only one to get a degree in his family, which made him feel really good about himself. But Ryan's a believer. He's really passionate about God, and his pride, he started to feel a bit bad. He thought, that's not what this is about. Ryan got a job at an accounting firm. He got married. He started a little family. He was working hard in his business, and the director saw this. And so what they did is they went to Ryan and they said, we want to promote you. They wanted to give him a good position, much more money than he was earning. And that was just ideal because he's just starting out in life. He's just got his family. He had twins. So, I mean, you know, he needed the money, right? But you know what he did? He prayed about it, and he went back to his directors and he said, yeah, thank you so much for the offer. I really appreciate that, but I'm going to decline. And you know what he said to me? Why he declined? He said he knew that if he took the offer, his directors would have a sense of ownership over him. Look at what we're paying you. Look at where we've promoted you to. So we own you. We own your time. That's the kind of reading between the lines that happens in his world. And that's why he said no. He said, my family is too important for me. I'm just starting off. You know, my wife's got twins at home. I want to spend time with my wife. I don't want to compromise on that. So he didn't. And he stayed in the same position. He's now at another firm. This was a long time ago. And I was actually chatting to him the other day. And I always rag him. I'm the poor church mouse, and he's the rich accountant. I mean, I know that's not the case, but we always rag each other, and that's how I rag him. You know, how's life in the fast lane with all your luxury and comforts? And we banter like that. But he said, you know, interesting you say that. His new boss now said, yo, you've been working really well, and the company's doing well. As a token of my appreciation, I want to buy you a really nice car. There you are. And you know what he said? No, thanks very much. I mean, that's amazing. But thank you. I've got a car. And it's actually not a fancy car. But he said, I've got a car. Why do I need another one? Thank you. I appreciate it, but it's fine. Now, I don't say this to kind of glorify Ryan. My point is, Ryan's not perfect. But I think he understands where work fits in his life. And I really respect that of him. And I think that's a picture of not, bringing your work, your job, your career into such a high place in your life as an idol, so to speak. You see, because Reagan, on the one hand, had a skewed view of life. His job, his position, where he went to school, all that kind of thing, made him who he was. Take it away, and what has he got? You see, that was his God. That is what gave him meaning. For Ryan, he worked hard, he enjoys his job. But that's not where he gets his meaning, his purpose, his righteousness from. You see, we all have this innate, God-given, actually, desire to worship, need to seek righteousness in our lives. Right from early on, we have this. But don't we look for it in the wrong areas? We tend to, throughout our lives, try and find it in all sorts of other places, except for God. Because that's where it comes from. That's where our righteousness comes from. That's where our meaning, our purpose comes from. But so often, we try and get it from our jobs, from our place of work. If you're in the corporate world, maybe it's your position, your money, your power. That's where you try and get your righteousness from. That's what gives you meaning, who you are, identity. Maybe you're an artist, and maybe you get that from people's opinions, people's applause. I mean, it's great to have a great review from a critic. It's nothing wrong with people applauding a great performance. But if that determines your self-worth, if that's where you're getting your righteousness, your identity from, that's a problem. If I get a great review, I am someone. If no one buys my painting, what am I worth? I'm a no one. What about a homemaker? What is our idol? Maybe it's our family. Maybe that's where we get our identity from, our purpose, our meaning. Maybe it's our home. If somebody comes to our home and says, wow, you've got an amazing home, I feel good. And there's nothing wrong with it, having a nice home and inviting people around, but that's where you get your purpose. That's where you get your identity, your self-esteem. Somebody comes to your home and, gives a little bit of a sideways look. Who are you? Worth nothing. I never want to see people again. I'm worth nothing because I don't have a fancy home. That's not where we get our righteousness from. I just want to look at a couple of people who also help us with looking at this whole idea of idols in our life. Now, there's a famous physician, doctor, but he's also a pioneer in the psychological field. His name is Alfred Adler. And it's something which Eric touched on last week. He talks about our nightmares. So he says, if you really want to know what you're living for, look at your nightmares. What do you have nightmares about? What keeps you up at night? What stops you from sleeping or wakes you up in the middle of the night? Very often, that's your idol. That's what you're living for. Not that you want to be necessarily, but you have put that thing in such a high place in your life that it usurps God's place. You know, this really struck home. I was quite young at the time. I was a student, and I just started going to church. And this businessman, quite a high-powered businessman, said something that stuck with me ever since. He said, you know what? As much as I have stresses in my job and I'm very, very busy, one thing that you need to know, I sleep well at night. I sleep soundly. I have a good sleep. Now, at the time, I was young and I was immature, and I knew what he was saying, you know, was good and had weight, but it was only much later where I really understood. It really hit me what he was saying. When I started to get the stresses of life and got busier and busier, and to realize that this man had given his stresses over to God. That's what he said. He saw his issues in comparison to God. And all of a sudden, they weren't so big anymore. And he slept well every night. Somebody else who is helpful in looking at idols, and then we'll move on, is Martin Luther. Now, he's speaking about the Ten Commandments here. And it's something very interesting if you look at what he's saying. He says the fundamental problem in law breaking, that is breaking one of the Ten Commandments, is always idolatry. In other words, we never break the other commandments without first breaking the commandment against idolatry, which is the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. I'll give you an example. Lying. Why do we lie? Eric says, because we're sinful. Most of us, if not all of us, lie, right? Yeah, but why do we lie sometimes and other times we don't? That's the question, right? Martin Luther is saying, because we make that thing an idol. In other words, at that time, when we tell the lie, at that point in time, we've put something else above God. We don't want to lie because we know that that's one of the Ten Commandments. It's wrong to lie. But when we do lie, something else has been put above God. Is it human approval? Is it money, power? Is it comfort? Something has pushed me to lie. I've put something above God. That's my idol. And we do that at work, don't we? We make those compromises. We put something above God, and that's idolatry. Okay, so what do we do? If, like me, you've been challenged by this, and you want to know, well, okay, maybe I have put my work or aspects of my work above God as an idol. What do I do? What do I do about it? Well, there's some really practical things I want to go through. There's 5 real practical things that I want us to look at to counter this idolatry that is actually, if we think about it, quite pervasive. First thing is a biblical worldview. If we want to live and walk in faith with Jesus, I really think that we need to have a biblical worldview, which means whatever we do, however we think, whatever way we view the world, it's through the lens of Scripture, God's Word. So that directs our actions. So when we work, we understand that work is a gift from God, and that we're doing it for the betterment of others and for the world. It's not to, make us rich and famous. It may do that, but that's not why we're doing it. We honor God with the work that we do. And we realize that we actually are citizens of heaven, right? And we are aliens here on earth. In other words, whatever we do has eternity in mind, not the here and now. That's not what we're living for. We're living for eternity. We're here now, but we're living for eternity. And that will affect how and what we do when we work. The second one follows from that, where we understand that work is partnering with God. We co-labor with Christ in whatever we do. And whatever we do is for God's glory. Whatever we do. And so even the most simple to the most complex tasks or work that we do, it has meaning. It's not just arbitrary, it has meaning. So we do it wholeheartedly. And we do it as if we're doing it for God. Everything we do for God. And that also means that as we work, we should almost be distinct. Not better than everybody else, but different. Why do they always have such integrity? Why are they always telling the truth? Why won't they bend the rules? Why do they work so well all the time? Even if they're going through a bad time, they work so well with integrity. It's because they follow Christ. Thirdly, as we live out the gospel in our work, we will have very good, sound ethical principles. Ethics are important. We are Christ's ambassadors on the earth. And when we work, we do it with integrity because of who we're representing. And we treat everybody with love and as our equal as we work. It's a great way to stop work being an idol in our lives. Fourthly, we understand why we're doing what we're doing. And that helps. That helps us to work well all the time. In the good times, we work well. But also when times are tough, we work well. Why? Because we know why we're doing what we're doing. And we know who we're doing it for. And that carries us through with a really good work ethic. Because we understand who God is and we understand why we're doing what we're doing. Now, finally, and this is the most important part, how we stop making work an idol in our lives is Jesus. So, if there's an aspect or our work as a whole or whatever it is that's an idol in our lives, it's a passion in us. And that's why we do it. That's what drives us to putting that up so high in our lives. And the only way to overcome a passion is with another passion, an even greater passion. And that is Jesus. When we realize or remind ourselves who Jesus is, when we remember what he did, what he went through for us, to make us righteous, to lift us up, to make us holy, we would not want to put something else in his place, raise something up above him. If we're reminding ourselves often, all the time, daily, who Jesus is, he becomes our righteousness. He becomes our purpose. He gives us identity. Because he took your sins. He took my sins. He took the wrath of the Father on himself so that you wouldn't have to. He went to hell for you so that you wouldn't have to. We don't want to put anything above that when we realize that that's what he did for you and for me. I want to illustrate it with a Bible story. If you don't know it's Jacob. Jacob is one of the patriarchs of the Bible, one of the early Israelites. And when he was younger, he met a girl, boy meets girl, Rachel, and man, sparks flew. He just fell in love with Rachel. So much so that he wanted to marry her. So he asks Rachel's father, Laban, for her hand in marriage. Then he agrees to work for 7 years for Laban, and then he can marry her. It's in Genesis 29. Listen to what it says. He says, the 7 years only felt like a few days to Jacob because he loved Rachel so much. How's that? That's passion driving someone. And it's when we realize who Jesus is, as I said, and what he did, that Jesus becomes our Rachel. We have such a love, such a passion for him, that becomes our overarching passion. And we do not want to put anything else in his place, because he is our God. He gives us everything we need. The rest is details. As the band comes up, I want us to reflect on this. I want us to reflect, well, where am I with this? Have I put something ahead of God in my life? Have I got idols? Is work my idol? And I want us to come and do business with God this morning. God is so gracious. He's so gracious. He is love. And he wants to meet with you this morning. He wants to do business with you. He wants to be your passion. He wants to just open the floodgates in your life and give it meaning, make it what it really should be. Maybe you've never you've never met this Jesus that I'm talking about, this person who gives you identity, gives you righteousness, he gives you purpose, and all these things. Well, I would encourage you to meet with him this morning and to say, hey, wow, I don't want to live like I have been living anymore. I want that all to change. I don't think I like this old self. I actually want you in my life. As the band plays the next song, I just want you to really reflect on that. Do business with God. And afterwards, come up for prayer. I would encourage you. Let's allow God to be God of our lives. Amen.